Have you ever watched your own father systematically diminish your worth in front of the next generation, knowing they're learning that this is how women in our family should be treated? The marble floors of my Lake Forest childhood home echo differently now when I visit. Each footstep a reminder of how sound travels, how voices carry, how humiliation reverberates through generations. My name is Avery Sterling, and at 32, I've built what most would consider a successful life. As VP of Marketing at Pinnacle Financial Technologies, I manage a team of 12 brilliant minds and oversee campaigns worth millions. My Gold Coast apartment overlooks Lake Michigan, my Audi A6 sits in reserved parking, and my 401k grows steadily each quarter. By every external measure, I should command respect, especially from family. Instead, I find myself bracing for impact every time I walk through my father's front door. The scent of my stepmother, Claudia's vanilla candles, can't mask the tension that permeates family gatherings. Christmas morning 2024 started like all the others, with my father, Richard Sterling, holding court in his leather armchair, dispensing wisdom and judgment in equal measure to his assembled kingdom. My brother Miles lounged on the sectional with his wife Jessica, their twin boys sprawled on the Persian rug surrounded by wrapping paper and expensive toys. The scene looked perfect, like something from a luxury home magazine, except for the way my father's eyes consistently skipped over me as if I were part of the furniture. "Avery, honey, could you help me in the kitchen?" Claudia's voice carried that particular note of forced cheer that I'd learned meant she was trying to redirect attention away from brewing conflict. But Richard was already launching into one of his lectures, this one apparently inspired by my recent promotion. The twins looked up from their new gaming devices, suddenly interested in the adult conversation. "You know, Miles, I'm proud of how you've built your practice," Richard said, settling deeper into his chair. "Real substance, real value to society. Not like these corporate marketing jobs where people just push papers around and call it strategy." His eyes finally landed on me, cold and dismissive. "No offense, sweetheart, but what you do isn't exactly building anything lasting, is it?" The room went silent except for the gentle crackling of the fireplace. I felt my cheeks burn as my 8-year-old nephews looked between their grandfather and me, absorbing this casual dismissal of their aunt's worth. Miles shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Jessica suddenly became fascinated with her coffee cup. The vanilla candles flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock my silence. "Actually, Dad, my team just launched a campaign that increased client acquisition by 43%, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor I felt building in my chest. "We're being featured in Forbes next month." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them, defending accomplishments that should speak for themselves. Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Marketing metrics, publicity, it's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it? When I was your age, I was building something real. Building wealth that lasts." He gestured around the room, taking in the oil paintings, the antique furniture, the subtle displays of generational money. "This house, this stability, that's what matters. Not some corporate title that could disappear tomorrow." I watched my nephews process this exchange, saw them unconsciously absorbing the lesson that their grandfather's work had real value while their aunt's achievements were somehow lesser, temporary, unworthy of respect. The weight of generational conditioning settled over the room like dust, and I realized that my father wasn't just diminishing me. He was teaching the boys to do the same to the women in their future lives. What I didn't know then, as I sat there swallowing my humiliation like bitter medicine, was that Grandma Rose had left me something that would change everything. Something that had been waiting in a vault downtown for 18 months since her passing, accumulating interest and power while I absorbed my father's casual cruelty. The executor's call would come 3 days later, and with it, the revelation that would shift every power dynamic in that perfectly appointed room. But that Christmas morning, I simply smiled tightly, kissed my nephews goodbye, and drove back to the city with my father's words echoing in my mind. I had no idea that the woman he'd spent years dismissing had actually built an empire, and that she'd chosen me as her heir. The call came on December 28th while I was reviewing Q4 marketing reports in my corner office overlooking the Chicago River. Mr. Lawrence Whitman's voice carried the careful formality of someone about to deliver news that would change everything. Miss Sterling, I'm the executor of your grandmother Rose Sterling's estate. I apologize for the delay in contacting you, but there have been some complications with the probate process. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? There are matters that require your immediate attention. I'd assumed Grandma Rose's estate had been settled months ago. She'd passed away 18 months earlier, and aside from a few sentimental items, her pearl earrings, some photo albums, her collection of first edition Jane Austen novels, I hadn't expected anything significant. My father had handled all the arrangements, speaking in hushed tones about modest savings and simple affairs. The family narrative was that Rose had lived comfortably but modestly on Grandpa's pension and Social Security. Whitman's office occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Willis Tower, all mahogany panels and floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a miniature model below. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, silver-haired and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The leather chair across from his desk felt like sitting in a confession booth, appropriate considering what was about to be revealed. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, he began, sliding a manila folder across the polished desk. She established multiple trusts, investment accounts, and business holdings over the past 40 years. She was quite strategic about maintaining privacy regarding her financial affairs. He paused, studying my face. Miss Sterling, are you aware that your grandmother owned Sterling Properties, the real estate development company? The words hit me like cold water. Sterling Properties owned half the commercial real estate in Lake Forest and surrounding areas. Their name was on buildings throughout the North Shore. I'd driven past their developments countless times, never making the connection. That's impossible. My father said she lived on a fixed income. Mr. Whitman opened the folder, revealing documents that made my hands shake as I read them. Bank statements showing accounts with 8-figure balances, investment portfolios worth tens of millions, property deeds with my grandmother's signature, dated as recently as 6 months before her death. And there, in her familiar handwriting, a personal letter addressed to me. My dearest Avery, it began. If you're reading this, it means Lawrence has finally been able to contact you without your father's interference. Yes, my darling, he's been blocking my attempts to discuss your inheritance for the past year. I've been waiting for the right moment to ensure you receive what is rightfully yours. My vision blurred as I continued reading. Grandma Rose had built an empire starting with a single rental property she'd bought in 1978 with money she'd saved from her job as a school secretary. While everyone assumed she was simply a widow living quietly, she'd been reinvesting profits, acquiring properties, building a business that now generated millions in annual revenue. The woman my father had described as simple had been a financial genius. The total estate value is approximately $47 million, Mr. Whitman said quietly. Your grandmother left specific instructions that you were to inherit the majority, 35 million to be exact. The remainder goes to various charities with a modest trust for your brother and small bequests for other family members. So, have you ever had a moment where your entire understanding of reality shifts so dramatically that you can feel the tectonic plates of your life realigning? I sat in that leather chair, holding my grandmother's letter, realizing that the woman who'd quietly slipped me $20 bills for gas money during college had actually been worth more than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But the letter continued with instructions that made my blood run cold. Your father has been trying to contest the will. He believes the money should be managed by the men in the family and has been pressuring Lawrence to delay the probate process. He doesn't know about the scope of my holdings, and I suspect he won't be pleased when he discovers who I've chosen as my heir. The phone in my purse buzzed. A text from Richard. Family dinner Sunday. Don't be late. The casual command felt different now, weighted with the knowledge that I was about to become the wealthiest person in the family while he remained completely unaware of what was coming. The weekend between discovering my inheritance and Sunday's family dinner felt like living in a parallel universe. I walked through my daily routines, my morning latte from the cafe downstairs, my usual workout at the gym, reviewing campaign analytics at the office, while carrying the weight of a secret that would detonate my family's entire power structure. Every mundane moment was colored by the knowledge that I was now worth more than my father could probably even comprehend. I spent Saturday afternoon in my apartment, surrounded by the documents Mr. Whitman had given me. Property deeds spread across my dining room table like a treasure map of the North Shore. Sterling Properties owned the office complex where my dentist worked, the shopping center where I bought groceries, even the parking garage I used downtown. Grandma Rose hadn't just been wealthy. She'd been quietly building an empire that touched my daily life in ways I'd never realized. Her personal letter revealed more details that made me understand why she'd chosen secrecy. Your father has always believed that women need financial guidance from men, she'd written in her careful script. When your grandfather passed, Richard immediately offered to help me manage my affairs. He was quite persistent, suggesting I sell the properties and invest in safer options that he would oversee. I learned to keep my business separate from family opinions. The irony was staggering. While my father had spent years lecturing me about building real wealth and dismissing my corporate success as temporary, his own mother had been demonstrating exactly the kind of strategic thinking he claimed women couldn't master. She'd started with a modest inheritance from my grandfather and multiplied it nearly 100-fold through careful investments and business acumen. I called my closest friend Jennifer, my college roommate who now worked as a financial advisor in Boston. Jen, hypothetically, if someone inherited a substantial amount of money and their family didn't know about it yet, how would you recommend handling the situation? I tried to keep my voice casual, but she'd known me too long to miss the undercurrent of tension. Define substantial, she said immediately, and define family situation. Are we talking about people who would be supportive or people who might try to influence how you use it? Jennifer had met my father several times during college visits. She understood the dynamics. People who might have strong opinions about a woman managing significant assets independently, I said carefully. And by substantial, I mean life-changing numbers. I found myself unable to say the actual amount out loud, as if speaking it might make it disappear. Avery, you need to be very careful, Jennifer said seriously. Money changes family relationships in ways people don't expect. If you're talking about serious wealth, you need legal protection before anyone else finds out. Documentation, trusts, maybe even a financial advisor who specializes in inherited wealth. Don't let anyone pressure you into decisions before you've had time to process this properly. Her words echoed Grandma Rose's letter. Take time to understand your options before your father learns about this inheritance. He will have immediate opinions about how it should be managed, invested, or distributed. Remember that this is your inheritance, not the family's inheritance. Sunday morning arrived with the crisp bite of a Chicago winter. I dressed carefully for dinner, my usual black slacks and cashmere sweater, nothing that would signal any change in my circumstances. But as I drove toward Lake Forest, I felt different. The Audi that had felt like a symbol of my independence now seemed almost quaint compared to the resources I could access. I could buy my father's house outright without touching the principle of my inheritance. The most powerful realization wasn't about the money itself, it was about the choice. For the first time in my adult life, I had complete financial independence from my family's approval or disapproval. Their opinions about my career, my lifestyle, my decisions carried no weight because I no longer needed anything from them. The freedom was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. I pulled into the familiar circular driveway, noting details I'd never paid attention to before. The mature oak trees that my father was so proud of, the stone facade that he often mentioned cost more than most people's houses, the manicured landscaping that required a full-time service. It was impressive, certainly, but it represented maybe 2% of what I'd just inherited. The scale was almost impossible to process. As I walked toward the front door, I could hear voices through the windows, my father's authoritative tone, probably holding forth about some business matter to Miles and Jessica. The twins' laughter echoed from what was likely the game room, normal family sounds from what was about to become a very abnormal evening. If you've ever stood on the edge of a cliff knowing you're about to jump, you'll understand the mixture of terror and exhilaration I felt reaching for that doorbell. Everything was about to change, and there would be no going back. Dinner proceeded exactly as I'd expected for the first hour. Richard held court at the head of the mahogany table, discussing Miles's law practice expansion, while Claudia served her famous pot roast. The twins chattered about their new semester, and Jessica shared updates about her part-time consulting work. I contributed to conversations about quarterly reports and client acquisitions, playing my familiar role as the daughter whose achievements were acknowledged but never quite celebrated. The moment came when Richard started his usual critique of my career choices. "You know, Avery, Miles was telling me about the associate position opening at his firm. It might be time to consider something more substantial than corporate marketing. More security, better long-term prospects." He carved another slice of roast, his tone casual but his message clear. My current success was temporary and insufficient. "Actually, Dad," I said, setting down my wine glass with deliberate precision, "I wanted to share some news with everyone tonight." The table went quiet, all eyes turning toward me. I met with Grandma Rose's executor this week. There were some aspects of her estate that needed to be clarified. Richard's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Lawrence called you? That's odd. I told him I was handling all estate communications for the family. His voice carried a note of irritation mixed with confusion. Apparently, Grandma Rose left specific instructions about who should receive her personal effects and financial assets, I continued, reaching into my purse to retrieve the folder Mr. Whitman had prepared for this moment. She was quite detailed about her intentions. I watched my father's face as I placed the estate summary on the table, the document that listed Sterling Properties holdings, the investment portfolios, the bank account balances that totaled $47 million. His eyes scanned the pages, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. "This can't be right," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Mother lived on Dad's pension and Social Security. She had some savings, maybe a small investment account, but this," he gestured at the documents, "this suggests she was worth tens of millions. That's impossible." Miles leaned over to read the papers, his legal training helping him process the information faster than the rest of the family. "Jesus Christ, Dad, look at these property holdings, Sterling Properties. Wasn't that the company that bought the Morrison building downtown last year? They paid $23 million for that property alone. Your grandmother was apparently very good at keeping her business affairs private," I said evenly. "She started Sterling Properties in 1978 and built it into one of the largest commercial real estate companies in the area. She wanted the family to learn about it after her death." Claudia set down her water glass with trembling fingers. "Rose never mentioned any of this. When she gave me her recipe box last Christmas, she talked about simple things and keeping family traditions alive. She acted like that jewelry box was her most valuable possession." "She was protecting herself," I said, remembering her letter's warnings about family interference, "and apparently protecting her inheritance choices from outside influence." I looked directly at my father. "She left specific instructions about the distribution of assets. The majority goes to me, with smaller amounts for charities and family members." The silence that followed was deafening. My 8-year-old nephews sensed the adult tension and stopped chattering about their video games. Richard's face had gone ashen, then flushed red as the implications became clear. "The majority?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Avery, this is clearly a mistake. Mother wouldn't have..." She understood that these kinds of assets need proper management. Professional oversight. This needs to be reviewed by someone with experience handling significant wealth. There it was, the assumption that had driven his mother to secrecy for decades. The automatic belief that a woman, even his own successful daughter, couldn't be trusted with substantial financial resources. "Actually, Dad, Grandma Rose was very clear about her reasoning," I said, pulling out her personal letter. "She wrote this specifically for tonight's conversation." I began reading aloud. "I chose Avery because she has demonstrated the independence, intelligence, and business acumen necessary to manage these assets responsibly. She has built her own career without family financial support and has shown the kind of strategic thinking that created Sterling Properties in the first place." Richard's jaw worked silently as I continued reading. She also wrote, "I expect Richard will believe he should oversee these assets. This expectation is exactly why I structured the inheritance to bypass such interference. Avery has earned the right to make her own financial decisions." The twins had stopped eating entirely, sensing that something monumental was happening but not understanding what. Miles stared at the documents, probably calculating what this meant for his own financial expectations. Jessica looked between her husband and father-in-law, recognizing the power shift occurring in real time. "This is unacceptable," Richard said finally, standing abruptly from the table. "I don't care what Mother wrote in some letter. $47 million requires serious financial planning, legal structures, investment oversight. You can't just hand this kind of money to someone without proper guidance." I stood as well, meeting his eyes across the table that had witnessed so many years of subtle dismissals and casual humiliations. "I'm not someone, Dad. I'm your daughter. The one with an MBA from Northwestern. The one who's been managing million-dollar marketing budgets for 5 years. The one whose financial planning allowed her to buy a Gold Coast apartment at 29. My voice stayed steady despite my racing heart. "And most importantly, I'm the granddaughter Rose Sterling chose to continue her legacy." The words hung in the air like smoke, changing everything they touched. For the first time in my adult life, I had said exactly what I thought to my father without worrying about his approval or disapproval. The freedom was intoxicating. 6 months later, I'm writing this from the sunroom of my new home in Winnetka, a 4-bedroom colonial with lake views that I bought outright, no mortgage, no financial dependence on anyone. The irony isn't lost on me that I now live 3 blocks from my childhood home, in a neighborhood my father always claimed was beyond our means. The cherry blossoms outside my window are blooming, and I can hear my nephews playing in the backyard during their Saturday visit, the first time they've been to my house without their parents hovering nearby. The months following that dinner were exactly as complicated as Jennifer had predicted. Richard hired his own attorney to challenge the will, claiming Grandma Rose had been unduly influenced and wasn't competent to make such significant financial decisions. The legal challenge lasted exactly 6 weeks before his lawyer advised him that Rose's documentation was ironclad. Medical records proving her mental acuity, multiple witnesses to her business decisions, and a paper trail showing decades of strategic financial planning. The more devastating blow to his ego came when Mr. Whitman revealed the extent of Rose's business relationships. She'd been quietly funding several scholarship programs at Northwestern, serving on the board of directors for 3 major charities, and consulting informally for other real estate development companies. The "simple widow" Richard had described to the family was actually regarded as one of the most astute businesswomen in the North Shore area. Miles handled the revelation better than I'd expected, perhaps because his legal training helped him appreciate the sophistication of what our grandmother had built. During one awkward coffee meeting in February, he admitted, "I keep thinking about all those times Dad lectured us about real wealth and lasting value." Turns out, Grandma was demonstrating exactly that while he was talking about it. The relationship with Richard remains complicated. He still calls occasionally, usually when some family event requires coordination, but our conversations have a stilted quality that wasn't there before. He can't quite bring himself to ask directly about my financial plans or business decisions, but I can hear the questions underneath his small talk. The dynamic, where he dispensed wisdom and I gratefully received it, has simply evaporated. What surprised me most was how the money changed my relationship with work. Instead of grinding toward the next promotion or worrying about quarterly performance reviews, I could focus on projects that genuinely excited me. I negotiated a consulting arrangement with Pinnacle that gave me flexibility while maintaining the intellectual challenges I enjoyed. Financial security, it turned out, made me better at my job, not less motivated. The twins visit every other Saturday now, a tradition that started when Jessica mentioned they missed seeing me regularly. We bake cookies, work on science projects, and I help with homework while their parents run errands or have date nights. Last weekend, 8-year-old Marcus asked me how I bought such a big house without a husband to help pay for it. The question broke my heart and filled me with determination in equal measure. Some women build their own success, buddy, I told him while we measured flour for chocolate chip cookies. Your great-grandmother Rose taught me that you can create your own security and independence. That's what she did, and that's what I'm doing. He nodded seriously, storing away another data point about how the world actually works versus how he'd been told it works. I've started a scholarship fund at Northwestern specifically for first-generation college students studying business. The Rose Sterling Foundation for Entrepreneurial Women launched last month with an initial endowment of $5 million. It felt like the right way to honor what she built while creating opportunities for other women to build their own empires. The most profound change has been internal. I no longer seek approval from people who've demonstrated they can't see my value. When family members make comments about my lifestyle choices, my career decisions, or my independence, their opinions carry no weight because I know exactly what I'm worth, not just financially, but as a person who inherited more than money from Rose Sterling. What gift will you finally give yourself when you stop waiting for other people's permission to recognize your own worth? The day I realized I didn't need my father's approval to succeed was the day I actually started living the life my grandmother had envisioned for me. She'd seen something in that young woman struggling to prove herself around the family dinner table, and she'd bet $47 million that I would eventually see it too. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is honor the vision someone else had for your potential, especially when that vision is bigger and braver than anything you dared imagine for yourself.